everybody, it's Derek with Lane Farm and Family. Thanks for joining us again. Today we're in a beautiful cabin in northern Minnesota, and we're going to be looking at learning how to caulk your log home or your home the correct way. Now, whether you have a log home or you just find yourself caulking around the sink in the kitchen, these tips that we're going to be looking at today will be of great benefit to you. And the reason I wanted to make this video this morning was not necessarily for the professional caulker, but more for the homeowner, the homesteader that's looking just to seal up their home, to conserve heat in the winter and conserve their air conditioning in the summertime. So what are the main objectives in caulking? I would say for me there's two objectives to caulking. The first is aesthetics. What does it look like? It helps things look nice. It cleans things up. The second is it seals things. So whether it's your logs or your kitchen sink, your aim is to seal things in or seal things out. So those are the two main objectives to keep in mind when you're caulking. How about materials? What material is the best? What product is the best to use? I like to use either a big stretch, it's called big stretch, or conceal caulking. If you're doing wood, logs, either one of these is going to be a great option. So where do we begin? Well, right behind me is where we're going to begin. What we're going to be looking at is our seams. So our notch seams. We're also going to be looking at checks as well. So any place that air is going to be able to leak through, we want to make sure that those are sealed up. We're also going to look at some windows and doors and some other applications for non-log home users. So let's look at how to seal up these seams. It's really ideal to have as small a bead as possible when we're doing this, but we don't want that bead to be too thin. So we want the bead to be 1/4 to 3/8 thick, a depth of the caulking. So we're going to start by putting some of this caulking in here, and we're going to move nice and fluidly and in a nice consistent motion to try to keep from having a lot of stop marks, which I'll show you what that looks like, and then I'll show you what a nice smooth line looks like as well. I'm demonstrating here a lot of stop marks. So if you notice here, there's a lot of stop marks on my caulking bead. That's going to be a lot harder to tool out. I've also given a little example of what it looks like to have a nice smooth bead. This is before I've done any tooling work to it. And that's going to make it a lot easier to get a nice smooth bead. Alright, so now with these two beads in here, I've got a rougher one and a smoother one. With these two beads put in place, I'm going to take my spray bottle and I'm just going to lightly spray it down, spray my finger a little bit. And that water and soap is going to keep this caulking from sticking on my fingers and dragging it. What I want to do is just push the caulking against the wood surfaces. And I'm going to be striking that caulking multiple times, just real lightly, not trying to drag the caulking. And now this rougher one is going to be lot more work to get smoothened out. So the upper bead took quite a bit more to smoothen out than this lower bead when I used my caulking gun in a nice consistent motion, trying to stay away from click, 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 clicking of that gun. Instead, trying to work on a nice smooth, and then timing that, redoing it with how your motion is going. It takes a little bit of time to learn that, but the idea is to try to get it as smooth as possible, so that way when you spray it and you tool it in with your finger, with a little foam paintbrush, or just those cheap little paintbrushes you can get at the hardware store, it's going to go a lot faster. You're going to get a lot cleaner look to it. Now let's look at checks. Checks are really in any wood, even wood from the hardware store, the lumber yard, might check or crack. This is especially a problem for log homeowners, where you're going to get larger cracks in your logs. Just as they dry, as it's warm inside, cold outside, the logs are going to be expanding, contracting, they're going to be cracking, and some of the cracks are good, and some really should be filled. Now, why do I say some cracks are good? Well, when they're smaller cracks, I'm talking like a 1/4 inch or smaller, that's how your log breathes. So you see a lot of the smaller cracks up here, and even right here, that's how this log home breathes, is out of those cracks. So it's very crucial to keep those open. We don't want to seal all the cracks up. The cracks we're mostly concerned with are the ones that are greater than a 1/4 inch, maybe even greater than a 1/2 inch, and especially the ones that are really big, mostly for air coming through, especially in these joints here where air is going to come through the joint and then come through the crack, and sometimes you can actually feel cold air coming through the cracks. So if air can come through, lots of other things can come through, especially flies. Ladybugs are really good at getting through. When you get to the bigger cracks, I've seen even mice come through those cracks. They're good at squeezing through anything to get to somewhere warm. So we want to fill those in, and backer rod is what we're going to use. And for this crack in particular, it's a smaller one, so I've got smaller backer rod, probably 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch, somewhere in there size. And we're going to put that in there, seal that up, so there's no more air exchange through those cracks. And we're really going to start by taking the proper size backer rod and sticking it in the crack there. And we want to recess the backer rod about a 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch into the crack, so we can allow enough caulking to stay on the outside. Sometimes it helps to take a knife also when it starts to get a little smaller and just kind of push that in. Once it gets too small, you can cut it off and just taper it. But make sure that you push it in there far enough, but not too far, but far enough so you can get some caulking to adhere to the top side and the bottom side of this check. So now that I have my backer rod in there, there's some different ways you can do this. Some people use masking tape. I prefer just to kind of wet down the surface on the outside surface where we don't want the caulking to stick. This is a pretty quick method and really pretty clean method. And then we're going to just caulk on keeping your tip nice and flat and pressing the caulking into the backer rod. And then all the way out to the end of the crack. There, doesn't that look beautiful? No, I'm just kidding. We'll clean it up here, and then it will look nice. So once again, we're going to just spray it down. We're just trying to keep things from sticking. And I'm just going to take my thumb and just kind of lightly pull that off. Use my rag to clean off my thumb. You can use your finger. God's given us 10 fingers, 10 different size fingers for sometimes different reasons. And caulking is nice to have 10 different size fingers. And then you can take your rag and just also lightly and that's a nicely caulked check. There's no caulking all over the log. It's only inside the log. It's about 1/4 inch of depth on my caulking into the backer rod. And so it's going to adhere to the top of the log, the bottom of the log, and it's not going to adhere to that backer rod. So you're going to get a nice stretch on that caulking, which is what the log caulking is designed to do. So now we've looked at caulking our seams, we've looked at caulking checks and how to make those nice and clean. Keeping things clean and smooth is really going to give your project a nice look. And it's also going to be successful as well when you do it properly. You can also see other places here, hard to see because it matches so well, but other places that I've started, as I'm working on this cabin, I've started some other areas with the caulking. But we're also looking at windows and doors too. And this is where you might find the most application, is windows and doors. This is whether you have a log home or you have a stick frame built house or a shack of some sort. Windows and doors are really tough places to seal up. So this might be window caulking. What we're looking at here, really it's basic, but it's essential. So where the logs or your boards meet your window is really where we're going to be looking to caulk here on this cabin in particular. And here we're going to need some backer rod in there, and then we're going to do a little caulking to this window. Just remember when you're tooling your caulking in that it's a very light touch, and it's just a lot of light strikes on the caulking. Every time you strike it, it forms that caulking just a little bit more. So really hard to show you what that caulking looks like along the window here, just because of the glare of the window. I just really couldn't get a good picture of that. But really the idea is a crucial place to caulk is around your window trim. Really before you put that window trim on, if it's a new place, you want to make sure that that's sealed up really well in there. But then afterwards, I mean, this cabin's been here for 20 some years, so I'm not going to go in and pull off this window trim. The best thing to do is to go and caulk along these logs, along the window trim, and it's really going to seal up things much better. You can do that on the doors as well. It's basically the same idea. You're just trying to seal up, keeping your heat that you've paid for inside your cabin and the cold outside of the cabin. In the years that I've been doing log home restoration on a professional scale, I've really seen other contractors and homeowners make the mistake of caulking and not tooling it in. And you might say, well, what does it matter? I don't care if it looks smooth and pretty, and that might be so, but really the intention of the two-part intention of tooling your caulking in is once again, so it looks nice. But the most important thing is for adhesion. So when we're tooling in the caulking, we want the caulking to stick to the substrate, to the surface of what we're working on, whether it's log or a stone countertop or your bathtub or toilet, whatever it might be. Tooling it in is important because you're pushing that caulking up against that substrate that you want it to stick to. And without that tooling in process, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure of your caulking. One of the surfaces, whether it's the top or bottom surface of your caulking, is going to give away from that surface, and it's not going to really get a good seal. It's going to be lots of blobs, and there's going to be lots of little pockets where air can kind of come through. So tooling is a very crucial part of this whole thing. So now we've looked at caulking our seams, we've looked at caulking checks and how to make those nice and clean. Keeping things clean and smooth is really going to give your project a nice look, and it's also going to be successful as well when you do it properly. You can also see other places here, hard to see because it matches so well, but other places that I've started as I'm working on this cabin. I've started some other areas with the caulking, but we're also looking at windows and doors too, and this is where you might find the most application is windows and doors. This is whether you have a log home or you have a stick frame built house or a shack of some sort. Windows and doors are really tough places to seal up. So this might be another. And so I hope you guys can use these tips in the future, whether it's for business or for personal use. I hope it helps you out. And I hope you join us next time here at Lane Farm and Family. Thanks again for watching, and